I never thought I'd come home from a quiet Sunday morning coffee run to find someone inside my garage, especially not a random woman from my HOA, standing there like she owned the place. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe she was lost or confused. But no, she was digging around like she had a right to be there. She didn't expect anyone to catch her. And she definitely didn't expect that the person she was messing with wasn't just a homeowner, but the city's police chief. It all started a few weeks back when some neighbors started complaining about Karen. Not her real name, but you'll understand why she's earned the title. She'd been going around the neighborhood enforcing rules that didn't exist, measuring lawns, taking photos, and leaving nasty notes. Most folks just ignored her, but when she took it too far with an elderly couple down the street, I stepped in, quietly, off the clock. But she didn't stop, and then came the moment she crossed the line, walking into my property like she had some kind of authority. No warrant, no permission, just her clipboard and some made-up rule about unapproved storage. I kept my cool, for now. But as she turned around and saw me standing there, the look on her face was priceless. That's when I realized she had no idea who I was, and she definitely wasn't ready for what happened next. She froze when she saw me, like a deer in headlights. Her hand was still on a box I hadn't touched in years, but she was too focused on figuring out who I was to keep digging. I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there calm, watching her try to piece it together. The silence felt heavy, like the whole garage held its breath. Then she finally spoke, all attitude, like she was the one who'd been wronged. "You're not allowed to store this much equipment in a residential garage," she snapped, waving her hand towards some old camping gear and tools. "It violates HOA regulations." I asked her one simple question: "Do you have written permission to be on my property?" She blinked, like the thought had never even crossed her mind. She didn't answer. Instead, she started rambling about being on that HOA board and having the right to do random inspections. But here's the thing, our HOA doesn't even have a clause allowing home inspections without notice. I knew that. I've read every page of the bylaws. That's the kind of thing you do when you're both a homeowner and someone who deals with law enforcement every single day. She clearly wasn't expecting to be challenged, especially not by someone who knew the rules better than she did. But I still didn't tell her who I was. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd push it. And oh, she'd pushed it all right. She stepped closer, acting like she still had some kind of authority, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're being very defensive," she said, eyeing me like I was the one who had done something wrong. "If you're not hiding anything, there shouldn't be a problem." I almost laughed. The nerve this woman had, breaking into my garage, then accusing me of acting suspicious. I kept my cool, though. Years on the force had taught me when to speak and when to let someone dig their own hole. I just asked her again, "Did you get approval from the HOA board to enter this property?" She didn't answer that either. Instead, she pulled out her phone and said she was documenting everything for the next board meeting. That's when I noticed something strange. She already had photos. Not just from today, but older ones too, taken from angles that didn't make sense, unless she'd been on private property before. That's when the bigger picture started forming in my head. This wasn't just a one-time intrusion. She'd likely been snooping around the neighborhood for weeks, maybe longer. I remembered a neighbor's complaint from last month. Tools missing, gate left open, cameras mysteriously unplugged. At the time, it didn't seem connected, but now, it was all starting to add up. I asked her to leave my garage. She refused. Said she had a responsibility to the community. That's when I knew, for her, this wasn't about rules, it was about power, and she thought no one could stop her. I could feel the tension rising with every second she stayed in that garage. She had no intention of leaving. She was pacing now, pointing at random things like she was collecting evidence for some big case. "You know," she said, "I've dealt with people like you before. Think the rules don't apply just because you have a nice house and a few expensive tools." Her voice was getting sharper, like she was building herself up for some kind of confrontation. That's when I noticed something that made my gut tighten. Her phone was still recording, but she wasn't just filming the garage, she was quietly aiming it at me. She was trying to bait me into reacting, maybe hoping I'd say or do something she could twist. I've dealt with situations like this on the job, but never in my own home. I realized then, this wasn't just some nosy neighbor gone too far. This was someone who thought she was untouchable. Maybe she'd gotten away with this kind of behavior before. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, slowly but firmly. I'm going to ask you one last time. Leave my property, I said, my tone serious. Her eyes narrowed. Instead of backing off, she doubled down. If you lay a hand on me, that's assault. I know my rights, she snapped. At that moment, I heard footsteps outside, 2 of my neighbors walking up the driveway, looking confused and concerned. One of them had their phone out. I could see them filming. Things were escalating fast, and I had a choice to make. But Karen had no idea what was coming next. The moment my neighbors appeared, Karen's whole demeanor shifted. She straightened up, fixed her shirt, and suddenly changed her tone, like she was the victim. "Thank goodness you're here," she called out to them, voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "He's been threatening me just for doing my duty to that HOA." My neighbors froze, unsure what to believe. I could tell they didn't know the full story yet. One of them, James, looked at me like he was waiting for a cue. But before I could say a word, Karen pulled out something I wasn't expecting. A printed letter with the HOA logo at the top. "I have written authority," she said, waving it like it was a court order. I took a closer look and instantly knew something wasn't right. The font, the spacing, even the header was slightly off. It looked official, but to someone who's worked with real legal documents for years, it screamed fake. James stepped forward. "That doesn't look like anything I've seen from the board," he said carefully. Turns out, he'd just been elected as one of the new HOA members last month. And Karen? She'd been voted out of the board weeks ago, but apparently she hadn't taken the hint. Now things were spiraling. Not only was she trespassing, but it looked like she was faking authority to keep doing it. I could feel the weight of the moment. My neighbors watching, cameras rolling, her doubling down, still not knowing who she was really dealing with. And then, just as I was about to speak, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. My captain stepped out, not in uniform but very much on duty. That's when Karen's fake confidence started to crack. The second Karen saw my captain step out of the SUV, her face drained of color. She looked between him and me, still trying to figure out what was happening. "Is there a problem here?" he asked calmly, but there was weight behind his words. Karen stammered, trying to put the letter back in her bag like it would suddenly disappear. "I was just following up on some violations. This man was being aggressive and..." That's when my captain turned to me and said, "Chief, you want me to take over from here?" Karen froze. "Chief." It hit her like a brick. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked at me again, really looked this time, and finally understood who she'd been messing with all along. That's when my captain turned to me and said, "Chief, you want me to take over from here?" Karen froze. "Chief." It hit her like a brick. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked at me again, really looked this time, and finally understood who she'd been messing with all along. I stepped forward, calm but firm. "You've trespassed, recorded without permission, and presented a forged document claiming HOA authority," I said. "You're not on the board anymore, and even if you were, you'd still need legal permission to enter someone's property." The captain nodded toward James, who was still holding his phone, recording everything. "We'll need that footage," he said. Karen didn't argue this time. She just stood there, stunned, as it all sank in. Just when I thought it was over, and she was about to leave quietly, she looked at me and said, "This isn't over. I have connections." I looked her in the eye. "So do I." And here's the twist. 2 days later, an anonymous tip came into our department's fraud division. Karen had been filing fake complaints under different names. all across the city. Turns out, my garage wasn't her first break-in, just the first one that ended with her getting caught.